Welcome to the Do Good X podcast, a sanctuary from the entrepreneurial grind. Hosts Kimberly Danielle and Stephen Lewis, advocates for impactful entrepreneurship, guide you on the path where purpose meets business. Join us to slow down, reconnect, and explore the challenges of under-resourced entrepreneurs, uncovering the unique journey of building businesses that make a difference. Now, your host.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Do Good X podcast. My name is Kimberly Danielle, and I am a community builder, a communication strategist, and a coach who comes from generations of faith-driven entrepreneurs and leaders who believe that our purpose should drive us to contribute to the common good. I cannot believe that we are over halfway through this season, and it's been an incredible journey so far, working with you, Stephen, as a co-host and having so many amazing guests, and I am excited to chat with who we have today.
Well, Kimberly, it's good to be with you. My name is Stephen Lewis, and I am a catalyst for positive change in communities and business. For over 2 decades, I've been working with many leaders of faith and entrepreneurship to live and to work on purpose. And so with intention, faith, and a commitment to their own well-being and their purpose in life. And so I am delighted to be here with you, our listeners. And I'm excited, Kimberly, for our guest today, who is none other than Devin Baptiste. He is a serial entrepreneur and an investor who is the co-founder and CEO of GroupRaise, a marketplace for large group charitable bookings at restaurants, active in over 500 cities with more than 10,000 plus restaurant clients. He has raised venture capital and investment from investors such as Techstars Ventures, Magma Partners, Kapoor Capital, and various top-tier angels. And as an advisor, Devin has translated the lessons that he has learned to help founders raise just over $50 million for their companies, and the vast majority of which have been underrepresented and emerging market founders getting their first and second checks. Devin speaks from his experience attempting to raise money 3 times unsuccessfully, and then the lessons that he has learned raising money 6 times successfully. Devin is passionate about supporting the startup ecosystem and helping underrepresented and emerging market founders get unfair advantages of bringing their impact and their visions to life. So Devin, welcome.
Well, thank you guys so much for having me. It's an honor to be here. It's a joy to get to talk to folks about my faith as well as my entrepreneurial journey. Those things don't always coalesce in ecosystems. So really, it's a joy to be here.
And we are so grateful to not just have you on this podcast, but also to have you as a Do Good X mentor. And so really looking forward to diving into your story and your insights and expertise to be able to share with a wider audience today.
It's a pleasure.
But Devin, let's go ahead and get started. How did the idea for GroupRaise come about? And what was the problem that you was trying to solve?
Yeah, so, back in the day, I always like to start my story. Well, there's 2 ways I can start my story. One is I usually start my story with my mom because my mother really formed me, and she was the very first Black woman in her parish to integrate into schools. And so in Louisiana, and so when she went, I say the original Lake Graham happened, they looked at her hair, they weren't sure. My mom was fairly light skinned, but then when they looked at her hair, they're like, I don't know. And the Klan showed up and burned her cross in her front yard. And they eventually left Louisiana, my parents, and moved to Texas. And so I grew up in kind of typical, mostly African American and Hispanic community that was a lot of crime, a lot of gangs, all this good stuff in the neighborhood. But then I went to school in a very affluent, the most diverse county in the country. And so I loved bringing my friends from school to my neighborhood and taking kids from my neighborhood to meet friends from my school and seeing these intersections. I was an Eagle Scout. I fundraised. I did all these kind of like local civic activities. And so that like first like finding intersections in and surprising places is what made me into a marketplace entrepreneur. I've been doing that since I was very young. And then I'm an Eagle Scout. I fundraised. I did all these types of things. So I was looking at how local businesses were growing by giving back. And when I was in college, I was in a band and I played keyboard and I sang in this band. And so I played at different restaurants and bars around the city. And I was talking to one of the owners who was like my friend, and he was wondering how he could get people from the community to come in. And I said, I think I know some organizations who might be interested. And so I called up my actually my high school band director, and I said, hey, there's a spot that would be willing to give some money back if you guys came. And I think the owner thought maybe 30 people would come, and 200 people came. And I remember just seeing this business owner delighted, like this was the most successful marketing thing he'd ever done. And I saw a lot of people just eating, enjoying, having fun. And I kind of stored it in the back of my mind. I said, I wonder how many communities look like this, where you have, these businesses who want to get exposure and get back, and you have these places that are constantly looking for the next place they're going to go, or ways to raise funds. And so, when I could, I thought this would be an interesting thing to build a product around to make it really easy for people to discover and find those types of opportunities. And so, yeah, that's a little bit of the origin story of GroupRaise.
Yeah, how much time did it take between recognizing the need and developing the prototype?
Yeah, so I would say recognizing the need, I did that probably in my early, like when I was a freshman or sophomore in college. And then I launched the product my senior year in college. So it was about 2 years kind of going back and forth and thinking about this. And I'd run GroupRaise is kind of like the fourth company I'd done. I was always launching little companies as I was growing up, and um, ran some different firms. And so I knew most of my companies were locally, like regionally focused. So I worked with the city of Houston on a program called Houston Hope to like fund houses um, in communities across the city and in these kind of 6 areas. And so I just done a lot of businesses that were focused on the city of Houston. So I wanted to do something that I thought could work at a very small scale, but then if it worked, it would work everywhere. You could find that use case all across the US at least.
Mhm.
And so um, that was that was kind of my switch. And it took about 2 years, I guess, from the time I thought about it to when I actually built a team around it and kind of did the first launch.
And I asked that question specifically because I know of a lot of entrepreneurs who have an idea and linger with that idea for years and years. And then the idea becomes, not relevant, maybe because of the shifts and changes in society and the field that they're currently in, or they get stuck in their own heads and don't
Hmm.
really move it forward. And so that's what really sparked that question. So 2 years to be able to build a team and develop that prototype, that's wonderful. And obviously you were able to move forward in a way that you didn't allow yourself to block yourself from moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I, I always try to be transparent about entrepreneurship these days. So I say like, I like to communicate entrepreneurship as the desert, right? So um, you can find water in a desert, like you definitely can, and you have to go out and you learn how to do it. And it takes a very specific tribe to go extract water. Now, I think it's an amazing tool if you have some way you want to push on the world to push on the world, right? You can build large human organizations, you can get a massive vision out there. But sometimes I feel though as entrepreneurship is sold as like self-actualization or some form of I mentor a lot of companies, and a lot of people thought they were getting into one thing and then they got into something completely different in their entrepreneurial journey. So I think one is kind of like you're saying, so finding ways to validate your idea fast so that you can get that feedback to know whether it's going to work or not, or whether this is for you or not is good. And I think we tend to, when we do that, we want to find the positive information always, like we're trying to get that motivation. But actually negative information is really great. And sometimes it's important to like listen to the signals and get on to the next experiment. And then I would say like, you know, so there's like two parts of my mind. So if you want to launch, you always just have to find your wins, right? And I used to say like stuff, just like really simple stuff like making your idea come into the world, like printing a business card, or making these days like making a really fast site on something like Card, which is like $19 a year to get your idea to exist on the internet, right? Like take some action to just see what you want to see in the world exists, and then that will give you energy to then take the next step. And very often, like you just have to take a step, and then that will give you energy to take the next. And then the first kind of compliment you get will give you energy to take the next. And then the first dollar you get, it's like you're really hooked. So I always think that like that's the way to path in, is just to take these really small steps and build momentum.
Hmm.
Um, but then at the same time, like understand that, um, being a founder is really chewing glass and staring into the abyss. Will take you to the edge of, you want to be called into this. You want to be, you want to have a great dialogue with with God, in particular about this calling, because it is, you know, I always say it's like with my team has essentially taken a nice car ride in a big van, and they're inside the van in the back seat. My experience is sitting on top of the van, trying to drive it with two pieces of string, feeling all the bugs and everything hit my face as we go down the highway, right? So know that like you know, the fruits can be beautiful and they're really great things, but there's 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 not all glamour this way.
Well, we appreciate you keeping it real as it relates to entrepreneurship. And it sounds like you've also have taken many steps because you have really grown group wise to, become active in over 500 cities, and you've had more than 10,000 plus restaurant clientele. And so I'm curious about what were the steps that you took to position your business for this kind of growth?
So I mean, my whole story is filled with grace, but a lot of it was just providential moments, right? Of, they say luck is opportunity meets preparation, but in my case, literally my first enterprise customer, her name was Grace. She ran Jason's Deli. So Jason's Deli was one of our early customers. I remember we got 17 Houston locations for Jason's Deli to do fundraising, and we were able to kind of leverage that relationship. And she was the regional manager for Jason's Deli's kind of marketing and sales.
Hmm.
This woman named Gracie Persanson, who was like put many years of food on my table. And she got promoted to become the national director of sales while we were working with her. And I called her and I asked if she would take us with her, right? So if she would expand not just from Houston and into all of her markets. And we went from being in one city to like 30 overnight, with that expansion. And um, looking back, like uh, it was a really big transition to go from being a regional player to then being not only in another city. Like we thought we were going to go from city to city, kind of launching cities and expanding. And it didn't look like that. We went from one city to probably 40 cities, 30 states, probably more cities than that, at least 30 states overnight. And so then figuring out like how to maintain a national network, it was a big skill up moment, right? To build a marketing organization that could now run national campaigns instead of regional campaigns, to increase the vetting. We got a lot more users both on both sides of the marketplace. We got a lot more business users who had a lot more demands, which put a lot more strain on the product and the product organization. We built, I say product organization, like my CTO Paul, like a guy, with how we would be able to do that. And so that was a very stretching moment, right? I in retrospect, I as much as a in retrospect, I wish we'd grown slower, which is kind of funny to say, but I mean, I wouldn't change it at all. I mean, I got so many lessons from the experience, but it was definitely a ripping
Hmm.
experience to Because yeah.
So what was the biggest challenge that you faced in growing overnight exponentially to a regional to now global? Like what was keeping you up at night, or what was the challenge that you were really trying to work at in terms of preparing for this type of overnight growth?
Well, I think the nice thing about movies, for example, is that there's like a challenge. There's like the moment, and so you get to watch a character face like, "Hey, I'm in Rocky, and I got to fight, and I'm going to fight this one creature, this one human being who's my nemesis." In that case, it was more that the fire spread, right? So it's just what was one thing. No, if it was one thing, that would have been great, right? You can really marshal resources, you can go find support, and you can go tackle a thing. And it's really the intersection of problems that became the stressor, right? It became that the product was breaking and needed to be expanded. It became the marketing needed to move. We had been bootstrapped, and we were bootstrapped to that point. But the thing that like you don't realize when you think about it is that growth is expensive, right? So typically when you go acquire new customers, you have to pay money up front, and then you get a yield of revenue from those customers over time. And so it's lumpy, right? Like we pay a big CAC and then we recoup our investment over time. And so when you get a lot of customers all at once, you get a lot of acquisition costs that all come at one time, which then pushes you into cash crunch, right? Where you both want to take advantage of the fact that you growing and that there's a lot of growth opportunity, you're being pulled into the market, but then your balance sheet is getting you brutalized, right, by that experience. And so um, there's like almost nothing that feels worse than failing than growing really quickly. like it's like one of these things people want, and then when you get it, anybody who's really ever got it is like, oh, it feels like somebody just hit you in the face really hard. And it's a kind of problem when you tell your friends about it. They're like, oh, but your company's doing really well. It's like, no, like yes, but it's like actually it's harder. The level of difficulty has gone up. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if people think about that. They get really excited about the opportunity for
They do.
scaling and growth. But then to your point, when it comes, there's a lot that's coming at you. It makes me think about, so you mentioned Rocky. I think about martial arts and a lot of, and I do Muay Thai. And when somebody is preparing for a fight, a professional fight, we go through rounds where they have 10 rounds with 10 different people, 10 to 12 typically, with different people to really get adjusted and to different styles of fighting, and it tests their endurance. So in a similar way, there are all these types of challenges coming your way, and they all may be different. And really, you have to have that resilience or endurance to work through those challenges for your business. So thank you for sharing that particular perspective. That's really good. Now, you also have quite a track record with helping other founders to raise money for their business, and particularly underrepresented founders and those who are new to the market. What specific strategies or tactics have you found to be effective with helping these founders secure funding?
Yeah. Um, there's a lot of things, but I think at first it's just like I was really blessed to get some key insight. So I have this thing in my mind where I remember everything I learned and when I learned it and who taught it to me. So I remember what I used to think about topics, and especially like when I thought a series of things that turned out to not be true. And I try to keep a good log of the audit of my history of thought on any particular topic and what I had to adjust in my own mentality in order to get from where I was to the next level, right? And there's always a next level. There's all I what like, and I specifically like. And so one of the stages in my process is after I think I've learned something, like I observed myself and I changed it, for me to really put it in the file of it's true. It's something that's like it's I'm a science nerd, so I like to think about science as anything that's replicable in the universe, right? So anything that is not, so like for it to truly be true, it can't just be true for me, it has to also be true for someone else. And so teaching for me is this mechanism where I take a lesson that I think I learned and I teach it to someone else. And I have this hypothesis. If I knew this that I know now earlier in my journey, I would have gotten over this hurdle much, much faster with much less stress and with much more speed, right? And so, um, mentoring founders is this kind of, exercise for me to really create validated learning and to like also validate that this is in the learned bucket. And I have a big bucket of unlearned, like unsolved problems. So, and I think everybody, I don't think that bucket will ever go away in my life. I definitely don't have it all figured out. But I have, I think learned some things. And then I found that when I taught those things, it didn't matter the race, the gender, the religion, the location, that these things tended to be true about the nature of startups. And particularly that I found that a lot of the advice that was given was true for the individual who gave it, but it didn't translate well to underrepresented communities. They hadn't added that layer on top of it to think through the kind of demons that come into your head when you're in a room and you face a lot of rejection and maybe you're a person of color, or maybe you're a woman, or maybe you have all these things that you're unsure about. And so I felt like there needed to be an additional translation layer on top of a lot of the traditional advice for running startups, because running startups traditionally have not always been run by people who look like myself. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about distilling those things down. And so now I try to, when I work with founders, find out where they are in their own set of belief and journey and build, and then give them some feedback and give them, in some cases, word for word tactics, in other cases, just like frameworks to get a different perspective on, people. The first thing I always start is that people won't give you money because you need it. That's a that's like the first principle. Like, yes, I know you need money, just like nobody will date you because you're lonely. It's not a reason. It's like that may be your catalyst to go to the market, right? To find a partner. But that is like, we got to talk about a hobby. We got to talk about faith. We got to talk about some shared interest. We have to talk about how we form and co-create value. That is what gives you these enduring relationships, not your sense of lack. And so many, it's like, it's not as though you can't talk about that business is hard because you don't have money or what, but that's like something, you talk about with a co-founder or with a fellow entrepreneur. It's like, or if you're lonely, tell that to your friend. Don't tell that on your date, right? So just really like helping people sort, what are dating conversations that we can have with investors and capital providers, and what are emotional support conversations that we need to have with ecosystem players, co-founders, other players. And we cannot those worlds can't merge if you're going to go get capital, because I don't know, I always say is that like capitalism is, for better or for worse, the two core driving emotions behind capitalism are fear and greed, right? So individuals who are afraid on missing out an opportunity and see something that's going to be very large and want to participate, right? Those are the two underlying mechanisms. So anything else that doesn't drive that human emotion of greed or fear tends to not be a useful mechanism in capital allocation. And so um, it's a very simple idea when you get it. So when I look at decks, every slide I look at is does it create some fear of somebody missing this opportunity, or some potential chance that this is going to be very large, and um, that they don't want to miss that. So it's just helping founders get oriented to think about what they're going into, and then to think about their opportunity. Like, there's a big difference between whether a business is good for you as a founder to run and operate to fund your lifestyle and your needs, and whether your business is a product for an investor to be able to purchase, to see that in the future they're going to be able to make more money than they give you today, right? And so
That's good.
very simple ideas in the end. Like, once you get that, once you can really understand, and then you're communicating why you as a founder and the company you're working on are the right individual and the right opportunity to really reach a scale that is an attractive product, right, for investors. So that's kind of, I don't know if that answers your question, but those are first principles of how I think about this and what I try to teach founders about going to the market to raise capital.
No, that's good. And that also leads over to our next segment where we'll explore insights from entrepreneurs and seasoned guides about the impact that mentorship can have. And so, like I mentioned earlier, Devin recently joined the community as a mentor. He's been out here mentoring other founders and helping them to navigate the world of fundraising, specifically underrepresented founders. And so, definitely want to dive more into the wisdom that you have around this, which you've already started to share. And so, my first question here is what are the key qualities or skills that you look for in founders who are your mentees that you believe position them for success?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So the place I am in my journey is I am not on the tourism board for entrepreneurship. I said this a little bit earlier. So, meaning it's important to know what you're getting into and actually how difficult it is. Like that, one of my favorite founders I work with, her name is Jade, and she runs a company called She Matters. And She Matters is focused on teaching healthcare professionals how to help, particularly African American women in hospital environments who typically have a uh, um, morbidity in the Black community is about 5 times higher than any other community in the US. And so there are very specific health markers and things to check for um, when you go into the hospital. And so they created a certification to really train medical professionals on what to look for when they're serving, particularly Black moms when they come to deliver their babies. And she's now successfully raised venture, and she's growing that program massively. But when she came to me, she had never raised money, and um, working with the founder who is pushing on the world in that way gives me so much joy, right? To help her, right, bring these patient outcomes to bear into the world and to help professionals become more mindful. And so it's like folks like that who have some sort of impact, but then they're also like the reason why she wants that business to be venture scale is because she wants that problem to have a venture scale solution, right? To be able to be solved not only regionally or in a specific hospital, but in every hospital in America, right? Or every hospital in the world, really. And so um, that is that's a hard journey. Like, and she's faced a lot of challenges, and I respect her a ton for the challenges, but it's also a worthwhile payoff, right? Where it's beyond. So I like, um, so for me, I love how those founders who are finding problems that are important problems that are maybe in the too hard to pick up pile for other types of founders, but are really passionate about that. Those are the founders who I love to give unfair advantages when they go to get capital, to go help them tell their stories, to help them navigate the entrepreneurial life, what it takes to do that. I typically like to work with founders who built something. So um, you've gone out and you hit your head against the wall because I have a hard time with founders who think that they know all the answers and haven't built anything yet. And so I'm like, life is hard enough. I don't really need to be hard on you. Like, this game is a hard enough game. So you have to have played the game a little bit. I think in order for kind of my advice and insight to to resonate, because until you hit a problem you don't know how to solve, it's all theory. And so kind of post theory founders who are working on impact are that's my sweet spot. But anyone who wants to endeavor to create a life or push on the world through entrepreneurship, I'm really passionate about helping. But that's just kind of a flavor of who I like to get up and go and help.
Let me ask you this. How do you balance giving support and guidance with allowing your mentees to make decisions and also learning from their mistakes?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the end of the day, I don't really tell you what to do. That's not my goal. I think my objective is to give you how I would think about a problem, and you can mesh that with how you want to think and approach about that problem. So my statement is, and I always talk about David and Goliath. So when originally King Saul gave David the armor, his armor, it didn't fit. He wasn't used to that sword. He wasn't used to that clothing. So he couldn't use it. So he had to take off that armor and then find his 5 smooth stones and go kill Goliath in the way that he could do that. And so I encourage founders, like, don't wear my armor. Like, my armor won't fit you. But what I can do is I can help you maybe get some insight about the problem, or get you to see maybe something you're not seeing in the space, and then you can go off and make your own decision about how you want to move forward. So, you know, um that's my kind of approach to mentorship, uh, is 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 that, and less being prescriptive. Right now, if you do want tactical support, I can provide like very specific tactical support, but it's more, I prefer to give you a framework, that becomes a part of your arsenal, so that you can go and solve it yourself.
So, for listeners who might be looking for a mentor, what do you think that they should specifically look for in a mentor and a mentor mentee relationship?
Um, I, I guess the first thing that comes to mind is it's fun to mentor people who are facing hard problems, either problems that they faced in the past, or so like you want to be in the exchange of mentee and mentor. There is there's joy to distill from a life experience to then help someone get through a challenge. So you got to be in a situation that requires specialized support. And so I think that oftentimes when we're in those situations, we shy away from, we have this tendency to hide. Lots of founders hide, right? When you're in your truest, hardest problems, we try to not take those to people. And I think that those are the problems that are interestingly, probably most exciting and interesting for some mentors to support. So um, I say, like, one is have something in specific that you want to discuss, or something that you're focused on, even if it's broad. Two is, like, go do something, even if it's not what the mentor suggested, but you take some action on what that is, and then report back, even positive or negative, right? Oh, hey, this is what I did, and this is how it happened. And then that loop, that feedback loop, is a very enjoyable feedback loop to be involved in, because you know as a mentor, you want the information you give to be useful. And so you want folks who can go, and that speed of, from the time that you give that feedback to the time that they go get a learning, an insight, like, there's a big difference between an idea and an insight. So an idea is something that's like an untested perspective on the world, and an insight is a response, right, to some action taken, right, and then as a reflection. And so you can start with ideas, but the faster that you get into like an insight feedback loop with a mentor, that's where I think you can create a lot of enduring kind of bi-directional enjoyment.
Well, if you're tuning in and you feel inspired by listening to this episode today and listening in to Devin's insights, don't let your inspiration go away. Turn your vision for your business for good into reality with the resources at dogetx.org. Connect with inspiring change makers with our DoGetX LinkedIn community, and explore other resources to help you on your journey.
But now we're going to turn to our segment called Off the Cuff. And we have a series of questions that we have not shared with Devin today, and that we're going to ask you, Devin, in kind of a rapid pace, kind of fast pace. You just want to answer what comes off the top of your head. And here we want to think about, what comes to mind that is uncensored in this regard. So with that being said, you ready?
Let's do it.
What is one piece of technology that has been a game changer for your business?
Oh, for my business, I don't know. The first thing that comes to mind is my phone. That's it. That's there's so many things that I do with my phone for the company and other people's. So that's the first thing that comes to mind.
What is one daily, weekly, or monthly practice that sets you up for success as an entrepreneur?
So I take a Sabbath. So I don't work from 7:30 on Saturday to 7:30 on Sunday every week. And so that's the time that I use to recharge, refresh. I don't check my email. I don't look at numbers. I don't look at my bank account. I try not to even think about business. I try to just focus on faith and family as this time period. And that kind of gives me this anticipation to return to work and plan my week on Sunday night. And it also gives me just like a rhythm of rest, which I think is one of the reasons why I've been able to go so long.
What has been the greatest lesson so far on your entrepreneurial journey?
So for me, being an entrepreneur is just really an opportunity to see God move in the world, right? And to be a participant of that. So probably one of the most interesting moments of my life was we needed about $250,000, and I was in the middle of a negotiation to get it, and I was working very late in an office at the time we had in Houston. And I remember there were two guys who were in the office, and it was like midnight, and they were the only people who were left, and they saw me and they asked me, and my statement is that God does fireworks and all I do is clap. And so, and that's been a lot of my entrepreneurial journey. And literally, as I said that, to Minute Maid Park, my office had a view of Minute Maid Park. Fireworks started over that park, and I got the signed doc for $250,000. And it was one of those very just like prescient like moments in your life where you recognize that you're working before the king, and there are just so many places and times in my journey. So as much as I love to learn about the physics of startups and what are the lessons that you can take, there's so many moments that are really just an opportunity to see God move in the world as a founder of faith. So yeah.
Wow. How much of your success do you attribute to your faith versus your own grit, will, and hustle?
Ooh, you know, for my whole perspective, like there have been so that's like a moment I just told you. We also got we did a program called 43 North, which is based in Buffalo, and that was like, I don't know, we competed with thousands of companies around the country, and it was a time where we had been running the business with a lot of skill, I'll say. We had 50, it was like a time where we had a week of cash for 52 weeks. It was a really painful, like your every second, every minute was around managing cash and closing the next deal to just survive. And I'd gotten a bunch of money committed into a fundraising round that we're going to close, and I really was like, I don't know if I want to do this Buffalo thing. And I remember that right at the end, I decided to take the Buffalo investment, and the very next day was COVID, and our business, which was eating out at restaurants, was just demolished. And um, but we were okay because we got this funding, right, that came even before I had chance to even think about how I was going to spend the money. It was going to be there. And so um, it's this odd dual track. It's kind of like predestination and free will, right? Like they are they are two tracks. You read the Bible, you can find a case for predestination, and good gosh, you can find a case for free will. Uh, I've got to give faith the overall win because there's just so many moments where we wouldn't exist without the providence of God. But then through this experience, I definitely haven't had smooth seas and have gotten some skills along the way.
Complete this sentence for me. Because of my entrepreneurial endeavors, communities or my customers will be more able to do.
because of my entrepreneurial endeavors, communities or customers will be more able to, um, in my company, I would say connect. We bring a lot of people who wouldn't find each other together. Um, and we bring a lot of deals and opportunities to very small organizations to get access to unrestricted funds that they can use to do the things that they want to do to do the good, that they're trying to do. So that's a lot of joy. Um, and then I would say, like for my entrepreneurial work, it's also probably connect, right? Which is again helping founders who wouldn't traditionally get access to capital connect in a way that makes capital providers excited to allocate to them, not obligated, which I think is most important.
You look like you want to say something, Stephen. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, Devin, this has been truly a wonderful conversation with you. I really appreciate it. You are definitely a wise colleague on the journey. And I think our listeners will benefit from so many jewels that you have dropped in our conversation today. So I just want to say thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be with us.
Yeah,
It's a
thank you so
joy.
much,
It's a
Devin.
pleasure. No, thanks for having me, guys. I hope it's helpful to at least one founder out there who's there. And yeah, I, hard moments require prayer and learning. So keep both.
Yes. Well, thank you so
Indeed.
much. All right. So we always ask a guest a related question, but I want to ask you, Stephen, what is a piece of technology that you find effective and useful for your work?
You know what? I have really been using different versions of AI in my search, communication, research protocols. And so I've really have been kind of digging the way in which I'd be able to engage it in a conversation like I'm engaging you, and to ask frequent conversations to clarify, to get sources, to help me rethink or reimagine something. So I've really found that a really important tool as I continue in the work that I'm doing with entrepreneurs and the larger body of work that I'm doing in supporting them.
Look, Gemini is like a conversation partner for me.
Yes. Yes.
So I'm definitely with you on that. So yeah, I would add to, well, for me, because I am not only a part of Do Get X, but I'm also a consultant, and as a solopreneur in that way, I find Wave super helpful, which is good for accounting, it's good for invoicing, tracking my expenses, uploading receipts, so that when it gets time to those quarterly taxes, and for you solo entrepreneurs out there who are new to it, make sure you're doing your quarterly taxes. It is easy and seamless. And I know it has other integrations too, and it integrates with my business, bank accounts, all of that, just to make things easy for me. And that's top of mind because toward the end of every month, I'm reviewing my expenses and my income and thinking about the month ahead. So that's like top of mind. So that's definitely a piece of technology that I find helpful, in addition to my wonderful conversation partner, Jim. I'll just say Jim for short, GEM.
Yeah, that's
for
great.
Gemini.
That's great.
Dropping additional gems.
Indeed, indeed. You know, another good one I've found, particularly I think for entrepreneurs, is looking at something like QuickBooks. So I know Waze is one, but QuickBooks is another piece that really kind of does all the things that Wave does with regards to your expenses, bill pay, AP processes, and also preparing you for when you might need to do an audit or have someone look at your financials on an annual basis as well. So that's good. That's another good resource.
That is a good resource. And I will say, for those of you who are just starting out and you have it's a small team, like 1 to 2 people, you might find QuickBooks a little bit expensive. But when you're growing, you definitely should be investing in QuickBooks. You definitely should make that investment.
Yeah.
So I know there are tons more pieces of technology out there, and there's constantly things emerging all the time. And so I love to continue to learn about what those pieces of technology are in different areas that we might leverage for our work. So, if you have some to share, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and enlighten me, because they might be ones that I want to try out or share with you, Stephen, that you might find helpful and instructive.
Or better yet, join our LinkedIn group and drop those insights there. Because you know what?
Because, yes.
Spread the knowledge so we all might win.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to you joining us again in the last half of our first season of the Do Good X podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Do Good X podcast. To continue the conversation or access our resources, visit www.dogoodx.org. Join us again for conversations that will nourish your soul, ignite your dreams, and empower you to build an impactful business, one intentional step at a time. Until then, keep striving, thriving, and doing good.